Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming out on this chilly Wednesday in December. It is great to see all of your faces, and welcome to WeHo Reads. This is a program that is sponsored by the City of West Hollywood, produced by Bookswell. And my name is Mike Che. I'm with the Arts Division. We, of course, want to acknowledge that the land upon that we are gathered on is the unceded territory of the Gabrielino Tongva and Gabrielino Kizh peoples. So please take a moment to honor them. And welcome to WeHo Reads. Also, we have we cannot do this without the support of our city council, who has always been extremely supportive of arts and culture here in West Hollywood. So we are very lucky to have our mayor, John Erickson, here, who would like to say a few words of welcome. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Oh, that's a hot mic. It's so great to be here with you all. I'm John Erickson. I get to serve as the mayor of the city of West Hollywood. What a really great time to have this. Not only is it bringing me back to my academic days of Lacan and a bunch of other philosophers who are written about in many of these books, but a really special time to think about a lot what could be taken away, a lot of our history, and really pointing towards the future. You know, the City of West Hollywood is a really proud partner in WeHo Reads and the arts, and our budget is a statement of priorities, and a statement of priorities is investing directly in the arts. And so I want to thank Mike and all of the panelists here tonight who are brilliant, to really bring us back to that fruition of this arts and culture that the city is really founded about, and we're going to learn a little bit more about tonight. So without further ado, you don't need to hear from this tired old politician. You should hear from someone. I am tired. It's been a long year, people. It has been a long year, right? You know, you're shaking your head. You're like, girl, 2025 is going to be worse. Okay, I'm going to shut up now. So there we go. And investing in the arts and investing in the future, I really want to bring up someone special who is near and dear to my heart and to this fabric of the city. And that's our incredible 5th poet laureate, right? Jen Chang.
Thank you, John, for all your support in the City Council. My name is Jen Chang, and I am a proud queer lesbian. So for tonight's Queer Lens, I'm going to share some lesbian moments in film that have affected me. Have you all seen Wicked? Okay, this crowd better have seen Wicked, right? So inspired by the Wicked movie that's just come out and Charles' book title, Spice of Life, I've written this for you to share some sapphic moments. Something has changed within me. Something is not the same. Go fish. Friends banter on the clumsy how-tos to get a date for that awkward baby gay. How did she make that baseball hat and chatter so cute? Lessons in flirting lead to legs intertwined. Something is not the same. Saving face. Slow sway romance in the middle of a frenzied foxtrot of matchmaking aunties and uncles. Mom, she's a doctor. They fall to their kiss. Something is not the same. Wicked solo dance becomes stripped silent mirror duet. A moment of exquisite connection to explore what is this feeling. Eyes meet. Hear the breath. Don't play the rules of someone else's game. When we defy gravity, when we see our hands touch, when we might be that girl, something changed on screen makes us not the same. I won't take too much more time from your lineup of features, but I wanted to bring some community events to your attention. I have a holiday poetry hotline that's free of charge. On the 21st, we encourage you to call, share this with your aunties, your nephews, your nieces. It's great for everybody of all ages. Call this phone number, 310-853-3952. There are flyers outside. Please check us out on Saturday, December 21st from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. And there are also some poem postcards that you can pick up if you need to send some holiday cheer. Add something to your greeting cards or add it to your gift cards. My name is Jen Cheng. Thank you for celebrating poetry with me.
Thank you, Jen. Jen has been an amazing poet laureate, and I really do encourage you to call the Holiday Poem Hotline. It's really, I have a friend, I should not have this friend because he does not like poetry. He texted me and he's like, Mike, the holiday poetry hotline is so great. He called it 4 times. So yeah, call in on the 21st. You can get a custom poem written for you between 2 to 5 p.m. And you can find the number on our WeHo Arts social media and also our website, weho.org/arts. We have our panelists, which we are so thankful that they are going to be part of WeHo Reads today, but I'm going to bring out our wonderful moderator, who is a 3-time Emmy Award-winning makeup artist, celebrity impersonator, and drag artist. This is the infamous and fabulous Glenn Allen.
Drag, honey, drag, demure. This is a demure microphone compared to who I am. We're so glad you can make it here to WeHo Reads. And we're going to share some great authors with you. We are here to celebrate the role of queer writers, artists, creatives who help us understand the world around us and who hold space for our community. Tonight's presentation is the closing event of WeHo Reads 2024. Let's hear it. Woo! Yes, this is the finale. You are witnessing the finale. Tonight, we will have readings, discussion, Q&As with our fabulous authors. First up, we will have Charles Jensen, is the author of Splice of Life, a memoir of 13 film genres, published by Santa Fe Writers Project 2024, and the collection of poetry, Introductions Between Takeoff and Landing, published by University of Akron Press in 2022. Our second author, applause. Our second author coming out will be Manuel Betancourt. He's the author of The Male Gaze, On Hunks, Heartthrobs, and What Pop Culture Taught Me About Desiring, quote unquote, men, published by Penguin Random House in 2024. Welcome, Manuel Betancourt. And third, but not last but not least, is our author. Aaron J. Young is a portrait photographer and author of Queen, published by Padlock Publishing, 2023. Welcome, Aaron J. Young. Woo-woo! Before I go any further, I must do a little striptease. These are genuine imported silk gloves. See how slippery they are? And I don't want to drop everything that's in my hand, so you get an extra show. So let me flip the script. I would like to call your attention also to the table in the back. There are these authors' books for purchase, and then after we complete our presentation, you can have your books signed. When we do that at the end, you'll line up here with your books. So anybody have a book in their hand already? They're right there in the back, so please don't rush all at once. Stampede. Also, let me see, opening wishes. Let me begin. Let me get back to my script. Charles. Many of us know you as both a poet and an important literary citizen as the director of the UCLA Extension Writers Program. In Splice of Life, you switch focus by sharing excerpts from your life story through the lens of memorable films. Why film, and how did this project come about?
I majored in film studies in college. I thought I wanted to be a filmmaker for a long time, and then I realized how many people are on a film set, and I thought I'd rather do something that's solitary. So I became a writer instead. But I have all this film love and knowledge, and when I started thinking about writing about my life, you know, turning your lived experience into a story is a lot like the editing that goes into a movie. And so the connection to me was really natural, and I just thought it was so interesting to compare my lived experience to what I was seeing in some movies that I had loved and one that I hated.
Amazing, thank you. And Manuel, in The Male Gazed, you examine how masculine is portrayed on screen and the impact it had on you growing up. How should the audience, if they want to see through a queer lens, be thinking about the on-screen portrayals of masculinity?
That's a good question, and it was sort of the animating question for The Male Gaze, because when I started to write a book about masculinity and I was looking back at these masculine images that I grew up with, I realized that the question I kept asking myself was, do I want him or do I want to be him? Which is a very queer question to ask, because you never know on what side of the coin you want to fall, and sometimes you want to fall on both sides of that coin. And I think the fact that we as queer folks can have those conversations of always being inside and outside and feeling part of it and also outside of it, it comes, to some of us, it comes up very naturally.
It does. Aaron. I thought the question was on my next page. How about, sorry. So first of all, Aaron's a photographer of the book Queen, and I'm one of his subjects in the book. We met at DragCon when he was shooting many of the characters. I don't know who's been to DragCon. Raise your hands. Thank you. Linda's been to DragCon. Every year. So, Aaron, the Queen, you have documented drag queens at their most proud, vulnerable, and royal. What did this project mean to you?
So this project just started off as a personal project. I just wanted to basically document the drag world, because I've always been really inspired by the artistry. So, I mean, it really just started as a personal project that I hoped would one day turn into a book. And it was just kind of like a little secret goal that I had. And then all the years later, you know, it actually morphed into Queen the book. So it's something, I mean, it's one of probably the biggest bodies of work that I've ever created. So, you know, it's one of the most important things to me that I've ever done. So, yeah.
How much time did you have with each of your subjects at DragCon?
Okay, so you personally will know this when I photographed you. So I would have like anywhere from 30 seconds to maybe 3 minutes to photograph somebody, because it's like a really busy time for the queens. They're usually running around, having their photos taken, meeting fans, signing things. So we had to be really, really fast. So yeah, I mean, sometimes somebody would step in front of my backdrop for 30 seconds, and I would just have to sort of become really present and hold space for that person, and then capture the shot as fast as I could. But it was really, it's a really stressful situation to be in, but I also kind of like it because it doesn't allow me to second guess myself. You just have to sort of go on your first instincts, and I believe that's when I do my best work. So while it's stressful, it's also kind of like, I put myself in those situations a lot.
What's the difference to you between shooting a portrait of the drag queens versus a straight portrait?
There's a lot more makeup. No, I mean, I guess the first thing that comes to mind is just that, like, there's like the drag persona that everybody has. And my work is really all about capturing the essence and the humanity of my subjects. So I do that with everybody, but I would say with a drag queen, there's sometimes this like sort of idea of who they have to be in front of the camera. That's more their persona. And so I'm always trying to capture sort of like the beautiful artistry, but also like what is underneath all of that and who they are as a human. And when it's with a straight person, I just have to break through the walls that they have.
Is it harder
to
break through the walls in a straight?
No, it's really an individual thing. You know, I would say it really has to do with like how the relationship that a person has to themselves determines sort of like how easy or challenging it might be to photograph them, because that determines sort of like the potential insecurities that somebody might have, and you know, all of the things that we all bring to, you know, a photo shoot.
Awesome, thank you. For all of you, collectively, in looking at each other's work, you have a connection of, what do you see as the connection, I should say, between you, all three of you?
Charlie, you're right there. You should go first.
Well, in the green room, we were talking about our work, and all four of us, and agreed that storytelling was one of the through lines that we all shared, that we're all finding a way to tell a story in a unique way, but also I think a way that represents queerness.
That is true. As creators, in creating a book, what are some of the anxieties in the process, and how do you conquer or overcome the anxieties of creating a book?
So for me, I mean, it was probably a different process, because it was like I was just creating the work initially, and then when I connected to a publisher, I already had the body of work created. So I just brought my like everyday neuroses to the I mean, it's just like the normal stressors of like, you know, like always wanting to capture something in a way that's going to sort of just sort of make, I always want to be proud of what I'm creating, and I don't believe that, like, as a creative, you can always hit the mark, you know? I think, like, some of it's just, like, trial and error and everything, and you fail sometimes. So I always bring a bit of, like, perfectionism into it, and just wanting to sort of, like, hit the mark that I have set for myself. So, and I mean, I've been doing this for, like, 16 years, so I'm much less hard on myself now, but that's, you know, something I definitely brought into this project.
Manuel?
What helped me was thinking of the book as something no one would actually read, which is very counterintuitive, because you obviously want a lot of people to buy the book, to read the book. But while I was writing it, what really fueled me, and because I'm also a perfectionist, and I was trained as an academic, which meant always thinking of a very ungenerous reader. who would be criticizing and be enriching, and that there be a combative nature between the reader and the work. And so I'm always writing for the person who's going to see all the holes in my argument, or who's going to bring their own lived experience that's going to clash with mine. And if I were to write that way, it's very crippling. And it can make you start second-guessing every single word you're using, every concept that you're reaching for, every anecdote. You're like, well, someone's going to misrepresent this, someone's going to misunderstand this. But that can be so paralyzing that I had to just let it go and be like, I'm gonna write this as if no one is going to read it. Because if no one reads it, then I won't encounter that ungenerous reader. And in that process, what I found was that I could also think of a very generous reader as someone who would want to see the book as generative, and who would want to, if there were gaps between what they were reading and what they've experienced, that they could fill it with something positive. So they would bring something to the table as opposed to finding holes. And that was very liberating, and also part of my just everyday neuroses that I battle every day.
And Charlie.
Well, I agree with what you just said, for sure. I never thought I should write a memoir because I thought my life was really boring. And then I had these thoughts like, well, remember that time I tried to seduce my college professor? Or when I smuggled human remains into Canada? Those might be interesting things to write about. But because I was so used to writing poetry where I could hide behind the identity of a speaker, putting my name on a book and saying, like, I lived this, I felt this, felt really vulnerable. And like Manuel, I hoped everyone would buy my book and that no one would read it. Unfortunately, that's not the case. So I am now getting comfortable with being perceived on a public scale, which is very weird. But also what I found is in writing these stories, I too imagined that no one would ever see them. And it allowed me to access a level of vulnerability and honesty that I don't think I could have achieved if I'd been imagining all of you sitting there judging me for the things that I have done. But what I found is that after I wrote the stories, I felt more comfortable with them as objects and as stories. It wasn't so scary to share them at that point. So you may read the book. You now have my permission.
Also, as far as the experience of you meeting your readers, what is an unusual reaction that you didn't think your book would inspire in someone else?
I'll take this one because I write a lot about masculinity and queer desire and queer bodies, and the book is, I would say, it's very sexy, which has led to a lot of very thirsty reactions from readers who, because I've shared a lot of myself, then I've become acknowledged, and so they have this idea that they know me really well, and they can approach me with a very casual kind of, sometimes very flirtatious, which I enjoy, but then it's also very disorienting because I was like, you are a stranger, which then sort of became the foundation for my next book, which is all about meeting strangers and the flirtatious and the fleeting intimacies we can create with them.
Yes, Ms. Chappell Rowan had that experience too, didn't she? She's like, you don't know me?
Yeah, but also.
Do we have some authors in the audience, possibly some writers? Raise your hand. Don't be shy. I know you're shy. Maybe anyone have a question for any of our authors?
Well, before we take questions, could we share a little bit of our work?
Yes, we can. Okay. That was the middle section. Yes. So right now, we're going to have Charlie read an excerpt from his book.
Thanks. Okay. So thank you, Cody and Mike, for having us here tonight. I'm going to read from the chapter called Film Noir in my book. Each chapter is named after a film genre. What you need to know is that this chapter is about my connection to a murder that happened in rural Minnesota in the 90s, and that in my daily life, I go by Charlie. So people will be calling me Charlie throughout this chapter. The film that I discuss in this chapter is Shadow of a Doubt, the Alfred Hitchcock movie in which a young woman named Young Charlie in the movie is visited by her uncle, Uncle Charlie, for whom she is named, and slowly realizes that he is a serial killer. Minneapolis, Minnesota, July 25th, 2000, evening. An ambulance wailed on Portland Avenue, zipping to the hospital down the street. 7 stories up, my boyfriend Tori and I draped ourselves over our couch and love seat. We smoked our after-dinner Camel Red cigarettes, waiting for Popular to begin. The overhyped fanfare of the Minneapolis local news knuckled into the living room with us, followed by the blather of its anchors. An update now. In an 8-year-old murder investigation, the anchor said, our attention half his and half our own. Police have arrested this man for the 1992 murder of Linda Jensen. A photo of the suspect flashed on the screen. We recognized the face. It was Tori's Uncle Kent. Our heads spun and our eyes locked together from our separate roosts. Neither of us could believe what we saw. The cigarette trembled in my fingers. I stamped it out in the ashtray. How is this possible? The report didn't offer details. Tori jumped from the couch and snatched the phone, punching a number into it before holding it to his ear. We waited. Fade in on, Uncle Charlie looks dead, flat and stiff on a Newark flophouse bed. In his expensive, well-tailored suit in this dark room, he evokes the vampiric legacy of Bram Stoker's bloodthirsty Count. Pale, his features so still they appear to be wax. Outside, drifters tear apart day-old bread on the waterfront. The rusted fossil of an old jalopy sinks into the earth next to a sign that reads, "No dumping." The city's slow ruin reflects the moral decay of the man who lies before us. Despite the poverty below, a pile of money spreads over the nightstand, tossed there in haste, even if its owner now seems unrushed. The police have connected the dots. They know who he is, how he got this money, how he can afford to dress so well, and why, despite these factors, he holed up in a rundown residential hotel with daily and weekly rates. What he really needs is to vanish, to get as far away from Newark as he possibly can, to go west. Becker, Minnesota, spring 1999. Boisterous and charismatic, midsection thick with middle age, Uncle Kent's blonde hair darkened to brown as it reached down into his full beard. He laughed loudly and often, and loved to spin yarns you knew probably weren't true, but may have been inspired by truths, the way a pearl at its core is just a grain of sand. He made a good living working as a car salesman in St. Cloud, and that unique salesman brand of kindness and coercion radiated off him. I couldn't help but be charmed. Uncle Kent, his wife Debbie, and their 4 children lived in a typical split-level home in Becker, population 2,730. Aunt Debbie was also typical, strong Minnesota accent, short hair, kind, soft-spoken. Their oldest son was close to graduating high school. He planned to attend a small college for Christian men where he'd considered joining the ministry and devoting his life to the Lord. Their twin daughters, both 8th graders, were identical neither in looks nor personality. In fact, they were merely sisters born together. One was quiet, neat, studious. The other wore dark makeup, talked about boys, and struggled in school. They too held their faith close to them and had plans to attend the sister institution of their brother's college, where they'd get a liberal arts education in a faith-based community of learners. Their youngest son was like a miniature version of his brother, but 10 years younger, still carefree and full of energy. Generous lawns skirted the houses in Kent's neighborhood. The homes featured 2-car garages, backyard decks with unobstructed views of the distant horizon. It was the kind of town where you want to raise a family, where you trust your neighbors to keep an eye on all the kids playing outside, riding bikes, wandering the unpainted roads until well after dusk. It was a community where murder existed only in television and movies. Killers were fiction. Safety was reality. The first time I walked into their home, a menagerie of crosses, hand-stitched proverbs and frames, and decorative psalms accused me of sins from walls, side tables, and throw pillows. I wrapped my arms around myself for most of that visit, worried that even though they knew Tori and I were in a committed relationship, they would reject us, reject me as the living embodiment of his transgression against the natural order. After a couple hours, my arms fell to my sides. Uncle Kent and Aunt Debbie were among the first devoutly Christian people I met who knew I was gay and treated me with dignity. Their small, basic kindness would bias me to believe their lies, even when the simple truth made more sense. Match dissolved to young Charlie reclines on her bed in a casual dress, but like a child has her shoed feet on the comforter. Her dark hair erupts into fluffy curls at her ears. This first scene in Santa Rosa echoes our introduction to Uncle Charlie, establishing an emotional parallel between the two characters right down to the lighting and set design, though this room is no flop house. It's a comfortable middle-class home. Young Charlie doesn't appear dead, but she does seem burdened with a distinctly late adolescent ennui. So much of this shows us she hovers between the worlds of children and adults, belonging fully to neither one. Uncle Charlie steps off a Santa Rosa streetcar. Gone is the dour man we saw on the Newark bed. This Uncle Charlie is charming, sincere, loving. He gulps down the affection his sister's family lavishes upon him. Thornton Wilder, playwright of Our Town, wrote the script for Shadow of a Doubt. You can see his signature in the way it idealizes small-town life, the stability of the nuclear family. Before Uncle Charlie's arrival, everything is perfect. Mother, father, and young Charlie's brother and sister, everyone is happy. Uncle Charlie's rupture of the nuclear family will ultimately turn the entire town upside down. Unmarried in middle age, urban, learned, cultured, refined, dapperly dressed, Uncle Charlie, while wearing the mask of the heterosexual, is wrapped in the trappings of cinematic queer coding used throughout the era of the Hays Code, when filmmakers were prohibited from representing queerness directly on screen. To work around it, they used innuendo, tropes, and symbols like striking fashion sense, suddenly last summer, over-identification with a mother figure, Hitchcock's Psycho, and sexual dysfunction, abuse, or violence, M. Uncle Charlie embodies what this era believed threatened the tranquility of the American family. Big Lake Township, Minnesota, February 24th, 1992. Linda Jensen was part of Uncle Kent and Aunt Debbie's neighborhood, someone they said they knew but didn't know well, the kind of person they'd wave to if they saw her out jogging or would offer a smile at the grocery store. When Linda's husband arrived home that Monday, he found his wife stabbed to death in their bedroom, their 9-month-old daughter crying in a playpen. A comforter covered Linda's body, a knife plunged into her chest to fasten it to her. The bed sheets were missing, never to be recovered. The autopsy revealed Linda had been raped. She was 39 years old. A photo of Linda accompanied reports of her death. She wears a simple cream turtleneck, dark curls falling to her shoulders, a deep red lip, her teeth electric white in her broad smile. Murder investigations work like a nautilus shell, beginning with those closest to the victim and working outward as each suspect is eliminated. Due to the nature of the crime, the way the body had been left by the killer, the initial investigation centered on the person closest to Linda, the one with the greatest means and most likely motive to do her harm, her husband. His name was Charlie Jensen. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Next, we'll have an excerpt from Manuel.
Thank you. I'll start right away. This is from a chapter called Laws of Desire. There is nothing sexier than a man in a pair of white briefs. I must admit their appeal comes from their ubiquity. Boxers with hearts on them may have been the go-to imagery of Saturday morning cartoons, and modest boxer briefs may have been all the rage in Abercrombie & Fitch advertisements. But there's no denying the simple and pure and therefore unassuming Y-front white brief stands as the industry standard when any one of us wants to dream up the ideal for men's underwear. But maybe I should just speak for myself. I find briefs enticing for what they do to the male body. Unlike other types of underwear, say boxer briefs, whose rise in popularity very much coincided with my teenage years, briefs have the perfect thigh-to-bulge ratio. Boxers hide and thongs flaunt, but briefs titillate by the very shape they contour and convey. Furry thighs and fuzzy navels create a landscape worth exploring, rolling hills that entice those eager to go sightseeing down below. As utilitarian as they may be, briefs have a way of coyly suggesting that which garments like jockstraps and wrestling singlets handsomely outline. Plus, unlike athletic gear, briefs have a welcome mundanity to them. They're tied to a bland ideal of a masculinity that they eroticize in delightfully unintentional ways. Moreover, there's something bashful about a man wearing nothing but briefs. That's why its arrival in advertising campaigns in the 1980s was greeted with such breathless adulation. For if we were to trust American Photographer magazine, there was a day in 1982 when the world awoke to find that sex had changed. This was 2 years before I was born, so in cases like these, I'm struck trusting the truthfulness of such a hyperbolic pronouncement, if not perhaps its accuracy. It was that year that Calvin Klein launched what would become one of the most successful ad campaigns of all time, plastering a sun-licked picture of Olympic pole vaulter Tom Hittenhouse on a 45-foot Times Square billboard. The Bruce Weber photograph, which featured Hittenhouse languidly leaning against a bleach-white wall in Santorini, his bulge front and center in a pair of Calvin Klein's signature white briefs, shocked many a bystander, causing a flurry of controversy that paved the way for the decades-long run of CK ads featuring beautiful male models in little else than tight-fitting branded underwear. With his eyes closed, Hittenhouse's tanned body did most of the communicating. As curator Diana Atkins told American Photographer in their 10 Pictures That Changed America feature, it was the height, the epitome of a sexual liberation, primarily for men, adding that the photo changed what advertising could be and could show from then on. What could be shown, of course, was a man in his underwear, in briefs no less. This was at the time revelatory in all senses of the word. Hittenhouse's body was an instrument that had for years been scrupulously examined by sports commentators, Olympic officials, and fans alike, and was here seen in repose, presented for our consumption, so as to encourage a decidedly different kind of consumption. No longer would this be the sole realm of female models. Men could just as easily be dangled in front of our eyes. The Hittenhouse photo felt in line with the envelope-pushing advertising ethos of the famed denim brand. In 1980, the designer had enlisted a then 15-year-old Brooke Shields for what would become a controversial, and thus instantly iconic, TV ad where the actress would ask the camera, "Do you want to know what comes between me and my Calvins?" Only to offer as tantalizing an answer as you can imagine. Nothing. The hint of the erotic. Shields was wearing a pair of jeans and a beige shirt. She really couldn't have been more covered up, was what's long been at the core of Calvin Klein's campaigns. As Marc Jacobs put it in a conversation with Klein for Interview magazine in 2013, Calvin's clothing seemed to be all about the sensation of touch. Later telling his fellow designer, "With you, it was more about an aesthetic, the dream of this beauty, those bodies, those faces." He may at first have been selling clothing, but above all, Klein was always selling a lifestyle. One built upon, as Jacobs put it, the provocation of getting naked. The Calvin Klein image of a blissful man in his briefs is but one example of how the 1980s turned that seemingly basic undergarment into a sexy prop. Originally designed in the 1930s as an offshoot of the jockstrap, boasting the same support but with a European twist, inspired, as Laura has it, by a postcard from the French Riviera picturing a man wearing a tight-fitting swimsuit. These jockeys went from hot new item to run-of-the-mill apparel in the decades that followed. Hollywood, though, opted for years to still feature the reliable pair of boxers, let those thighs and bulges make their films look racier than they'd otherwise be. That is, until the briefs went mainstream in the 80s. One need only think of Tom Cruise dancing in his tighty-whities in Risky Business, of Keanu Reeves shaking his cute butt in Parenthood in similar attire, of Christian Bale showing off his physique at the start of the 1987 set film American Psycho. And yes, of Marty McFly in Back to the Future having to take on the moniker of Calvin Klein once his mom, a teenager in the past Marty has unwittingly found himself in, peeks at the brand and briefs he's wearing and assumes he's personalized his undergarments. Or if you're to travel farther abroad and farther away from the United States, Gael Garcia Bernal diving into a pool in his white, soon-to-be transparent briefs in an imagined version of 1980 Madrid and 2004's Bad Education. Now, as someone who spent an inordinate amount of time in the underwear aisle at our local department store when in need of a new pair of 3, I can't thank Klein enough. Underwear models were some of my earliest memories of seeing the male bodies so displayed. Here, you were encouraged to take them in, to see how tight or loose they fit, see how far up they ran or how low they hung. The briefs, I mean. But the subtle homoeroticism that has come to define the Calvin Klein brand since, one need only peruse the My Calvins hashtag on Instagram, was there in Weber's original campaign. As Klein shared with Jacobs, that shoot was meant to introduce the underwear line, and it was about the body. When the face was turned away, it was always about the body, but then sex always came right back into it. You know, I collect antiquities. This is him talking in this interview. And that non sequitur, where he goes from like that face turned away and the body, and then he says, I own antiquities, feels like he's, let me say that again. That non sequitur, when he goes from talking about bodies to the antiquities, is telling. Classical antiquity era busts and torsos, the kind displayed in art museums all over the world, are some of the most socially sanctioned examples of the male form's beauty. They were the only other instances where in public, I was asked to gaze at the male body undressed. And yes, sex always hovered out of frame. On that note, I should probably amend my earlier statement. Whenever I think of a man in a pair of white briefs, it is not Hittenhouse I picture, nor is it myself, though that kind of narcissism has come into play the more pieces of underwear have come to accumulate over the years. No, I'm always thinking of a certain Pedro Almodóvar movie and his muse. For there is nothing sexier than Antonio Banderas in a pair of white briefs. Now, if such an image eludes you, I hope it's because you've not yet had the pleasure of watching the Spanish filmmaker's 1987 queer neo-noir Law of Desire. I've long held that all you need to know about life you can learn from Almodóvar's Oscar-winning film, All About My Mother. But it is his earlier film that I find most instructive when I think of my queer upbringing. I sometimes mourn the gay man I could be now if I'd found this riff on a Patricia Highsmith plot earlier in my life. Earlier, that is, than when I was in my early 20s. But then I console myself by remembering that it is never too late to luxuriate in the ways of Almodóvar. I should be happy I ever found him at all. For in finding him, I encountered a kindred spirit. Perhaps not someone I wanted to be or become, but someone who seemed keyed into my same wavelength. Someone whose love of melodrama led him to create some of the most fascinating and complicated women I'd ever seen on the big screen, and whose love of men led him to conjure up some of the most delectable male characters I've encountered. Delectable, but also the most deplorable and despicable and disreputable. Not that the women in his films are all blushing flowers or saintly martyrs, but there's something to be said about the joy the filmmaker has taken in creating male characters who are as likely to seduce you as they are to kill you. None exemplify this better than Banderas' Antonio in Law of Desire, a character and performance that captures the undeniable erotic charisma that thereafter made the Spanish actor the go-to guy for any and all Hollywood roles that called for a Latin lover type. It's easily one of the Almodóvar films I've rewatched the most in my lifetime. It's a film I return to time and time again to find new angles to what's ostensibly a delirious exploration of the rote allure of masculinity and the self-destructive power of same-sex desire. And if you want to know what else I have to say about this movie, you can go to the back and buy The Male Gaze, now out in paperback. Thank you.
Thank you, Manuel. And then finally, I do want to ask Aaron, as far as not reading from the book, but there is a humanity and a reference to courage for the title, Queen. And in your foreword, you explain the word. Can you tell us a bit about that?
So we went through a ton of different names for this book, and the only one that just seemed like it made the most sense was Queen, to just keep it super simple. Also, then we could do like Queen Volume 2, Volume 3, Volume 4, hopefully. But what was the question? I got it.
The title is in reference to the foreword of your book.
Yes. Well, yeah, in the foreword, I believe we kind of discussed like the history of drag a little bit, sort of like where it started and how it's kind of evolved over the years and how it's influenced pop culture and influenced culture in general. And I thought that was just like a really interesting thing to have, to sort of give people a context to how we ended up in the place that we currently are with, you know, drag becoming such a sort of mainstream thing that it is today.
And where did putting together the word queen with drag, how did that come about?
I mean, to be honest, I was just brainstorming, and we did, because of COVID, we had, you know, a couple extra years to figure stuff out. So, so it was just a lot of months of like brainstorming and discussions and meetings, and there just wasn't anything that really felt like it landed in terms of a good title. But I liked the word queen because it kind of, you know, you can interpret it however you want, but it's always like drag queen, but then there's like queen, you think of royalty. To me, then when I think of royalty, I think of like sort of something that's like classic and regal, and that's something that I always sort of think about in my work when I'm creating. And then I guess also from there, I would think of like the word dignified, which is again something that I always want to bring to my work when I'm photographing people. I always want to photograph them in a very dignified way.
And who's that there?
Yeah, so that's the picture of Glenn. And I got to say that's
page
probably
56.
I think that is probably the most referenced photo in the entire book. Like over and over and over, people will bring up that specific photograph because they're so blown away by the artistry. So yeah, it's really.
Well, that is Upside Down Girl. That's a character I invented. Having said that, every character in your book is something that the person invented and created outside of the norms of society. Since your book is filled with people in a unique expression, what is that telling the world?
I mean, I think it's just, I think it's showing that it's beautiful to be unique, and it's beautiful to be different, and it's beautiful to be true to yourself and to whatever that looks like. Yeah, I think it's a beautiful representation of that, because there's, I mean, every single photograph is like a different artistry, a different look, a different, you know, everything is so different. There's no like two photographs that are anything, you know, like each other. So, and it also spans, you know, like a lot of different facets of drag as well, which I wanted that to, you know, I wanted it to be as all-encompassing as it could be. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, I think it'd be a good time, I'll go to my producers, to go to the audience maybe. What do you think? Just so, do you want to pass this one around? Great.
Hello, thank you all for coming. This has been great. My question is for Manuel and for Charlie. In the Black community, representation's been so scarce, there was a school of thought that all television and movies made by Black creators was valid and necessary, and we had to throw our arms around it. Do you feel that way about movies and television made by queer creators? In short, do I have to love everything Ryan Murphy makes? And if there is content made by queer creators that you don't care for, what is it about that content that turns you off?
Yeah, no, I don't. I mean, it feels kind of glib to just say, oh no, we shouldn't pull our focus. But I think also the question has always been, I've always seen that question as like, there's an artistic choice that we can make or an artistic answer to that question, and there's also a logistic industry answer, right? So like, I think for the longest time we were told that we were meant to support things because the more we supported queer content, it would just sort of like lift every other type of queer content. And I think what we found is that, you know, that tends to only lift that one Ryan Murphy boat up in the... there's a lot of queer content I don't care for. And I think I'm allowed to say that in the sense that like queerness is not the thing that thrills me. It's the story you're telling, it's the characters, is it compelling? And to me, it's story driven. So it's the reductiveness of identity politics can sometimes feel kind of bullying, right? And I think the fact that we can critique and criticize and not enjoy something and maybe articulate why, not to tear it down and not to say that it shouldn't have been produced, because other people may enjoy it and that is perfectly fine. But I should not be, I don't think it makes for an interesting artistic or creative ecosystem when that is the sole arbiter of the thing that we're supposed to like, which is, that it was made by a queer creator or a gay creator, a lesbian creator, a trans creator. I think we can be a little bit more discerning, and it means like just requiring more. We want to be raising the bar. We want great content. And I don't think just accepting mediocrity is sort of the way to do it. I won't give other names.
Like that was just off the top of your head.
That was on the top. Yeah. I don't think about this all the time.
I think this is a question that is about scarcity. And I think I have two thoughts about it. We were subjected to so many representations of queerness, such as what I discussed in my chapter, that were harmful. And we were not in control of those representations. They were meant to define us without our consent. And so now that we have opportunities with queer creators to define aspects of our community ourselves, I think the new burden is the pressure that like, we can't define everyone. Like queerness is such a big tent. There is no way that any one representation of queerness will speak to everyone, will capture every experience, or will be relevant to every viewer. So that's why we need more. We just need more. We need more variations. We need more voices. And until we get that, I think we'll be in that uncomfortable situation where we might even feel bad about feeling critical about representations of queerness, because if we speak out against them, are we risking losing those opportunities for people? Will we go back to how it was where dominant communities are representing our stories for us? So I think it's an important question, and it's one, I think about it too, like a conversation I have among queer people versus a conversation I have with straight people about like a Ryan Murphy show is gonna be really different, because they don't need to know how he's failed me as a homosexual, but I can tell other gay people that and feel okay about it, you know?
Oh, hi there. My question is for all of you. What
Yeah, we can hear you.
what is
You have to speak right into it.
what is something that surprised you in the process of creating your work?
So Aaron is first going to answer what surprised him during the creation of his project.
I mean, it's pretty wild to me to just be like sitting up here with two other authors because it's not necessarily. I mean, I've had like, it's shown me that I can achieve something that I set out to do, because it was a pretty lofty goal in my mind that I didn't really tell anybody about initially. And then to have, you know, a publisher find me, and then to actually have it turn into a book, and then to have the book came out about a year ago next week, I think. And then to just be sitting here is pretty crazy to me still. So, yeah, I think the biggest thing that, I don't know if it's a surprise, but I feel like it showed me that I can, you know, accomplish something pretty big, and I want to take that forward, you know, with whatever comes next in my life.
Manuel.
That's not supposed to work that way. The thing that I surprised myself in writing this project was how personal it became. I'm a trained academic. I have a PhD, and the original pitch for this book was I just wanted to write about masculinity, and I really wanted to write sort of these like critical essays, like third person, I just wanted to see what was on screen. And through conversations with fellow writers and with my agent and later with my editor, they were the ones who were encouraging me to thread my own life and to find in memoir, in autobiography, a way to lure the reader in so that I could then talk about these like high or sort of more academic or loftier sort of ideas. And originally I pushed back because I didn't think I needed to. And so I keep joking that I became sort of a begrudging memoirist because I never wanted to do that. But I found that that's the thing that has made me connect with readers more, and that it really is the thing that as soon as I was able to say, this is my experience, this is what I was going through, then other people have come up to me and say, like, you know, it wasn't Mario Lopez in Saved by the Bell, like you talk about in chapter 2. It was, you know, so-and-so from Gilligan's Island, or so-and-so from this other movie, or it was, you know, Chris O'Donnell in Batman. And we all have these different touchstones, and the fact that I was able to sort of like harness them in my own personal experience and find that was a thing that connected with readers. It continues to surprise me.
This is a great question. And I'm going to, earlier I said, oh God, the thought just left my mind. Well, I'll start here. I learned in writing this memoir how to make myself into a character, and to write that character in a way that it would be compelling to someone who doesn't know me to care about that person. But I think one of the biggest lessons I took away from this about writing memoir, you know, when I mentioned I never thought I should write a memoir, that's what I was going to talk about, because nothing had happened to me. But I realized that writing a memoir is not about what happens to you, it's about what you've done. And so when I was talking to my editor about one of the chapters, the last line of it is, I was the villain of this story. And he said, actually, Charlie, you're the villain in a lot of these stories. And I think that makes for a better memoir. But it's really, I think you can view memoir as holding people accountable for what they've done to you. But for me, it became holding myself accountable for the things I've done to other people. And the amount of growth that came out of that, just in the process of writing it, was, I think, really meaningful to me.
So if anyone has a question, I've been informed these are relatively new mics, so the range does not reach all the way to the back there. So, thank you.
Hi. Were there any scraps that you sculpted away from your project that didn't get printed that might become new projects of their own? And if not, perhaps you can tell us about the next projects you're working on. Thank you.
Fine, I'll take this because then I get to play show and tell. My next book, called Hello Stranger, comes out January 14th, so in like a little over 5 weeks. And it was a little bit of a scrapped piece, as I talked about it before. I was thinking a lot about strangers and connecting and flirting, and it became this. But the one chapter that I originally intended to write about in The Male Gaze was about Batman and Robin, because I really wanted to write about Chris O'Donnell's lips. And I just didn't find a way to really write. Apparently that does not make a full chapter. I apparently can't really stretch an entire chapter on Chris O'Donnell's lips. But I did what was supposed to be a giant chapter on Batman and capes and Robin. I sort of condensed it, and you can find it in one chapter that opens, and it's all about how I learned to love capes, and capes as sort of this like gender sort of a cape can be fabulous, and it can be villainous, and it can be an opera cape, or it can be a superhero cape. And so the idea for this longer chapter on Chris O'Donnell's lips just became a tiny little footnote about why I love capes and why we should all wear more capes. And I feel I'm trying to make capes come back, and I'm still working on it. So.
Yeah, so in the process of making this book, it's like 120 some portraits, I think. And there had to have been at least 170 portraits that we had to choose from. So we had to make some cuts, and we had to edit it down, which again was like a lot of back and forth with the publisher, editor, myself, and like just going around and around until we kind of narrowed it down to the photos that are in the book. And then so after COVID, DragCon came back in 2022, I believe. So for 3 years, with this year included, I've just continued to create this body of work. So that's what I'd say I'm working on next. Is like I'm basically just preparing myself for when we're ready to do the next book, so that the work will be there, and then we'll just go through the process again.
I actually didn't have any extra chapters. I was adding stuff right until the end of this to get to 13. I thought Taylor Swift and I should really focus on that number. But this has inspired me to keep writing memoir or memoirish work. So I have another manuscript about singing karaoke for 20 years, which is called Hot Mic, What I Sang at Karaoke and the Men Who Drove Me to Do It. And as I started writing the book, it really became about all of the men that I was having like situationships with, or relationships, and how the songs that I sang at karaoke were related to my life. And I also won a City of LA Individual Master Artist Fellowship this year. So now I have to write another book. And that book is a retelling of the Inferno that has an academic voice in it that talks about how the novel is reflective of my lived experience. And the book is also a character that yells at me while I'm writing it. Still very early. I don't know where it's going or what's going to happen, but I am very much along for the ride wherever this project is going.
Glenn, would you like to also answer this? Like, have you learned anything like surprised you through drag and performance, and what are you working on next?
Sure. Relating to Queen, the book, obviously, and as far as storytelling through pictures, maybe not words, but a picture says 1,000 words, and I think your book is full of messages. The main one being courage, because these, for most part, are little gay boys who, like me, possibly, most of them, have been bullied. And when I shared my art, when I was younger, 10 years old, I was bullied by the other kids on the playground. And I was made to feel shamed about my creativity, about my use of color and sparkle. And so I vowed to never share that with the world ever again. And that was 10 years old. And so from that point, I had to pretend to be like everyone else and wear what all the other boys were wearing and do what all the other boys were doing. Basically just hiding myself, pretending not to be me, which a lot of boys and girls still do today. I think we have more freedom, and I think the freedom came powerfully with RuPaul and being that one symbol of drag courage on TV, and then getting a little TV show out of it, because really at the beginning, and even now, it's partly a freak show for people to be like, oh my God, look at those weirdos. Well, that freak show has taken over the world. And I think the message is because it's been bloomed to such a large community and a large focal point of people's entertainment and intrigue, is because they are watching not a freak show necessarily with lashes and glitter. They're watching courage. They're watching humans share their individual uniqueness, which has not been a very common thing in humanity. And I think it's a message for not just gay, lesbian, trans, bi people who primarily take over the drag world, but it's a message to the cis community, the straight men and women who have to act like each other and hide their own creativity just to fit in. I think it's also a message to them that they can start being free, that they can start being unique, that they can start being different, that they can claim their own soul, their own spirit, their own purpose here on the planet. You don't have to fit in. You don't have to do the same thing as everybody else is doing. You don't have to just be accepted. You can actually live.
I think
Any
we
other
have
questions?
time for one more
We have
question,
thank
and
you.
then if anyone wants, we'll be doing a book signing. We can line up here for people to sign books, or maybe take a picture with Glenn. But do you want to come up here and ask your question? Well, we're recording. So oh my God.
Hello. Holy shit. Okay, yeah. I guess this could also actually go for all four of you too. The question I have is more about how has your own perception of your own queerness evolved through pursuing your individual work, specifically the projects that you're here to discuss today?
Charles, I'm going to call on you.
All right. Wow. Well, this book is a lot about. This book starts kind of with my earliest awareness of being queer and ends with being on Jeopardy, which is the most visibly queer I've ever been in my life. And I think the arc of it is embracing and being comfortable with both being perceived as queer and also loving myself with that queerness. I think I hadn't ever really stepped back and looked at the whole picture in that way before. I've had moments that have been instructional for me, but I think seeing everything mapped out that way made me feel good, and also made me feel sad that had to be how it was for me. And I hope that people growing up now have a different and frankly easier road to walk.
I had someone read my book and then tell me that it was a sad tale about a young boy. And I had never thought of it that way, because the book sort of traces it. The first chapter opens with me watching Sleeping Beauty and wanting not to be the prince, but to be Maleficent, because I just thought that she was fabulous. But of course, just as Glenn was describing, those are things that you were not encouraged to do. I was encouraged to be the prince. I was encouraged to be boring and masculine. And so what I started tracking with the book is how do we go from those notions of masculinity tied to queerness and shame, and how do we expand them? So the final chapter is all about drag, and it's all about Drag Race, because I couldn't write a book about masculinity that didn't then break it apart, that didn't actually get to the moment where we actually think of it as expansive, not as toxic and not as bad, but what could be a positive way in which we could rethink and blow it up. And of course, I find that drag has been doing that. Femininity and masculinity, the twinness. And just as what Charlie was saying, as soon as I mapped out the book that way, and the lessons that I've been learning from when I was an 8-year-old to when I was in college, which is roughly where the book ends chronologically, it was about a way of embracing that queerness. And then what does it mean that when I was in my 30s, I was finally able to go to a party wearing a dress and feel okay wearing makeup and not feel self-conscious. And also, there's just such small gestures, and they still felt so huge because of so many decades and so many people. and actually getting to grapple with that on the page and then sharing it with folks has been, it's been a reminder. And so like I now are those things that I take for granted, but it took 4 decades to get there. But I'm happy I'm here now.
So my relationship to my queerness has been intertwined in, especially my early life, with a lot of shame and self-loathing, self-hatred, self-harm. And then in my adult life, going on the journey of self-forgiveness, connecting to myself, learning to love myself, learning to love my queerness and other parts of myself, it helped me to develop a very deep sense of compassion and empathy for myself that I believe is very intertwined in the work that I create with people. Because my work is all about really holding space for somebody to feel safe enough to be their authentic self for a moment in time. And so that whole journey around my queerness that I've gone on, it's given me that deep level of compassion and empathy that I bring into my photo shoots and into the way that I see people. And I think it's also probably fuels a big part of why I even have a desire to hold space in this way to begin with, and to sort of shine a light on especially people who have been marginalized in their own lives for whatever reason. Yeah, and so that, I mean, I carried that within the work of this book, but also just, the work that I do every day with my photography.
I will say, as far as sexuality goes, and kind of learning how to be independent and owning who I am as a gay man, has to be accompanied by how I learned to not be okay with it. And I feel like this country, collectively, has done that on its own. We have invented the ability to input shame into our own people. In other countries, they don't have the word gay or trans. They don't separate their people that way with those labels. We do. In other countries, they just call each other by their name. If you're a trans person, you're Sue. There's no issue of hiring or bathroom or this or that. You're Sue, you go to the girls' restroom, that's it, end of story. There's no argument, there's no debate, there's no political situation. So America is its own unique torture chamber that we, as far as the journey of life, need to rise above and overcome in our own life those limitations that are put upon us. And I remember, first and foremost, that I am a spirit having a human experience, not a human having a spiritual experience.
So, well, thank you all for coming tonight. Can I get a round of applause for our wonderful panelists? Yeah, they're available to sign books if you all want to line up over there. I'm sure Glenn would love to take a photo with you because she didn't get dressed up like this to not take a photo. There's snacks in the lobby if you want to continue to have a conversation out there. And don't forget to validate your parking. I will validate you now. Thank you for coming out. You're wonderful people. And of course, thank you to Cody, our producer, for tonight. Have a wonderful December. Thank you.
Thank you, Bookswell. Coming up, we want to meet you, we want to answer more questions and sign books.